Hi, everybody. Thank you very much for the organizers. But I have to share with you that sometimes I don't read all my email from the top to the bottom. I might be the only one, maybe, but and this caused me sometimes some problem. And here, maybe I have a problem, because I thought that when I was invited to present one of my study about cannabis users. So, and not a synthesis of these study. So I apologize, but my PowerPoint is already done, and you're stuck with me for the next 20 minutes, so I hope it won't be too bad for you. First of all, I don't have any conflict of interest to declare. And what I want to talk with you today is about formal and informal control of cannabis, the experience of cannabis users. Not any cannabis user. We were not interested in the experience of those who had developed cannabis use disorders. We were not interested with the people who are sometimes using cannabis on a weekend, and then they will do that next time, next year. We were interested in the experience of regular cannabis users. And why? Maybe in order to give them a voice, because in the consultation process that we've done here in Canada, in Quebec, we heard a lot about scientists and specialists. We heard a lot about government officials. We heard a lot about representatives of industries and lay people, but we didn't heard a lot about cannabis users. For sure, we did this study before legalization. So it was the formal and the informal control that they were using and that were affecting them before legalization, for sure. So the aim of this study was to understand how regular users develop strategies to regulate their cannabis use in moderate and responsible way in an illegal context. So you see that the responsible way was something important for us. And in what you'll see that in the inclusion criteria that we've got using our sampling. So the specific question we've asked is, what are the relative impact of formal, so the law, and informal controls on the drug use behavior of regular cannabis users in a prohibition context? Because it is the case. And how do the formal and the informal control interact? So it was the two questions that we have. Social control is, in sociology and criminology, a very complex question. Usually, for cannabis and for the other type of drugs, the social control that we are using is prohibition. It is, for the last century, it was prohibition. It is one type of social control, but there is also other type of social control. This formal control, the law, the regulations, didn't have a high impact on use or deterrent of users. There are some references here, but you could find many, many references going that way. On the other hand, there is informal control of cannabis. And this is the type of control that are being carried out by unofficial controlling groups or individuals based on moral rules. It could be the peers, it could be the family, could be sometimes the bosses, the employer. So this control, informal control, no regulation, but it is in the context of prohibition, this informal controls have some impact on, particularly on the young. We know that peer are very, very influential on the drug use of the person. Family also have a big impact, but it is on an informal way, informal controls that they have an impact. We see all the what we've done with tobacco. In few years, this informal control mixed with formal one, regulation, have a tremendous impact on what is going on with tobacco. Many people tell us this morning that 30 years ago, if we would have been here, half of you would have smoked in the room. Nobody ever think about smoking in this room right now. It's completely different, but it is a mix of formal and informal control impact. Okay, so what we've done, we wanted to have access to the perception, the discussion of regular cannabis users. What was the inclusion criteria? It was these people were using cannabis on a recreational way. So, and we had a small test to see if these people had developed SUD, substance use disorder. They were using it at least for 5 years. As a matter of fact, on the average, these people were using cannabis on a regular basis for more than 10 years. And at least they had to use cannabis 2 times a month. But as a matter of fact, on average, they were using 100 times a year. They were also, in our inclusion criteria, it was important that these people were well integrated in the society. So these people could be your right neighbor here, sitting right aside of you. Because these people, we wanted to have people who were having a stable job or studying for a while, having a stable housing, having that's it. And were between 20 and 49 years old. We had 164 people. It was qualitative interview that we've made with these people throughout Canada. We see here about 40 in Halifax, 50 in Toronto and Montreal, and about 40 in Vancouver. These people were about, on average, 31 years old. So you could imagine why they were using cannabis on a regular basis for almost 10 years, because they start at around 20. Half of them were male, female. 91% were born in Canada. 49% have a university degree. So it is quite different from the population we usually study when we're studying cannabis users. 86% were worker. About 10%, if I remember well, was at university, studying at university and things like that. So, and the annual income, 40% had more than $50,000. I've made a lot of research, of studies with cannabis users that develop a dependency. And these people usually doesn't have $50,000 or more as income. It is a lot less, a lot less. The instrument that we've used is a questionnaire, sociodemographic questionnaire plus a small addiction questionnaire. Semi-structured interview that the length was about an hour, I would say, on the average. And for the data analysis, for those who know a bit of sociological methodology, we use the grounded theory to analyze the data. So let's look at the results. So we asked them about the control. We asked them about the law. We asked them what their perception about prohibition. So the vast majority of them were saying that we need formal control. It is important to have formal control. And these people, you remember, are using cannabis on a regular basis for at least 5 years. One of our persons told us that that's what I would expect. It's normal to have some formal control, for sure. En så var det why do we need formal control? It's to protect society and youth. It is important to accept that the law is legitimate. So it's important to have control. And they know, the vast majority of them were saying that we don't want young people to use cannabis when they are 13 or 15 years old. The majority of them would agree with that. So we need control. But they also have reservation about repressive and punitive approach because they were saying that it doesn't prevent and it doesn't have any impact on the use, on their use and on the use of the people they were having around. It forced them to have contact with the criminal network, and for them it was quite bad. And they perceive low risk of being punished. As a matter of fact, the majority of them never have been arrested. They didn't have experienced any arrested because of their cannabis use, and nobody had a criminal record. But you could see that it is a special type of population, the population that could be here because they have a regular job, they are well integrated in a society. I'm a criminologist, I know that there are people who are accused and have a criminal record because of possession of cannabis. But when you look at the profile, it's not the same profile. The profile of those who have been found guilty for cannabis use usually are from minorities, they are from poor section of the society. We have to keep in mind. And these people that we have interviewed are not these people, but it's not a special sample. It is a representation of many people who are here in the Canadian society. Okay, so what we can say is that users don't respect the law, but take precaution to reduce risk. So there is a balance between what is the control, the formal control, and you'll see informal control that will appear in order for them to be able to function in the society, still using a cannabis that is not legal. Again, for formal control of cannabis, several respondents are very critical about prohibition. We could imagine we are sometimes here also. It causes harmful, perverse effect rather than protection. They are talking about, a lot of them are talking about criminal record for simple possession. They say when it's not legal, then the supply is kind of the end of criminal and then is tainted. This is for the control of product, I'm sorry. It is excessive for them, it is disproportionate. There is a disproportion between danger and penalties. One of our respondents told us, you can go murder someone and be out in 3 years. Maybe he's exaggerating a bit. Why would they put 5 years on for cannabis? Because at one point of the interview, we present them the text of the law. So they were reacting also. They were saying, no, it's not possible. We cannot expect 5 years. But they were saying also that it is exaggerated. And for them, possession of cannabis is simply not a crime. And we could put this question also. It is a misuse of public resources, and the public resources should be invested in tracking down criminal organizations for them. One of our if we look at external informal control, we see that participants avoid cannabis use in certain contexts for different reasons. Respect was a topic that appeared very often. They don't want to influence others. They want to respect the others that are not using cannabis. For other people, it seems inappropriate and not comfortable doing that in presence of the people who are not using cannabis. So they were just not using cannabis. They want to preserve their image, their reputation also. It was something important. And it might be the same, let's say, if there is legalization. They want to maintain their productivity, their performance. Don't forget, they are well integrated in society, so they don't want that cannabis use would impact their performance. They want to avoid judgment of others and fear of non-acceptance of the other people. So it is a reason why they were not using cannabis in some different situation. The social context and the time and the place that influence cannabis use, they don't want to use cannabis in public places. We have a good idea why. They don't want to use cannabis in the presence of non-users, in the presence of family members that don't use, in the presence of older, usually mother-in-law, younger people, colleagues and bosses, we understand why, contexts in which performance is expected at work, at school, in the morning or during the day. You see that it is not because it is prohibition. They're not supposed to use anywhere, but in some circumstances, in some places, in some times, they don't use them, and this is their choice. It is informal control that they internalize. I will go to the discussion right now. So there is a balance between formal control and informal controls. But according to their voice, informal control tend to have a larger impact on their behaviors. According to them, they have a larger impact for their behavior. The informal control, according to the discussion we had with them, determine why, when, and where cannabis will be used. The core values that they were sharing about using cannabis is to respect. Respect who? Respect the youth, especially the youth. This has been mentioned many times. Respect the people who could be bothered by their use of cannabis. Respect social context. Their general attitude about cannabis use is to preserve their reputation, maintain productivity, and avoid judgment of others. In the context of legalization, formal control will be a regulatory control rather than criminal law. This is great. We talked a lot about this new formal control, but we talked about here this morning, after this, in the harm reduction, we talk about also informal control when we talk about the advertisement and all that. But it is important to keep in mind that formal control has limited impact if it is not accompanied by informal control. And we could have a tremendous impact right now when we are writing the new regulation, the new formal controls. We could have an impact on informal controls. So it is important to develop both the formal control, the new formal controls, but also the new informal controls. And how could we develop this new informal control is through good information campaigns, it is through good prevention campaign, and it is through good education campaign. And this we have to keep in mind when we are drawing our new regulation. I think my time is up. Thank you very much.